Last night we got 2 new episodes of Daredevil Born Again, one of them a standalone story and the other one finally delivering what we've been waiting for this full season. Let's talk spoilers. Hi, my name is Sean and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your thoughts on these 2 new episodes of Daredevil Born Again. This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil away. No need for spoiler warnings. And I imagine there'll be quite a bit to talk about with these 2 episodes because episode 5, the standalone episode, very polarizing on the internet up to this point in time. And then episode 6 pays off so much of what we've been building towards that I imagine you've got lots of things to talk about, and so do I. So let's get started. We'll talk about episode 5, the bank heist episode first. Matt shows up to the bank hoping to get a loan for his law firm. He happens to run into Miss Marvel's dad. Nice little crossover from some other Marvel stuff. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And as he's turned down and leaves, he hears some shenanigans happen. So he heads back in to try and save the day. And, well, he's a superhero, so he's able to save the day. Now, a lot of people on the internet have had very strong opinions about this episode because it is a standalone episode that has a very different vibe and tone from the rest of the show. The storytelling of the show in general has a style to it, even the way that it's intercutting with Fisk's story. It has these little on-the-street news broadcasts. There's a flavor to it. And then this episode is set entirely at a bank. It's totally self-contained with very few connections to outside plot points in the season. And it's just a little bit more lighthearted. For me, that's actually exactly what I liked about it. If you're like, what on earth is going on? It's killed the momentum of the season. The tone is totally different. I don't get what we're doing here. I understand. But for me, this is the most TV these Marvel Disney Plus shows have ever felt. Television for decades and decades and decades was standalone stories where you'd have a set of characters that you enjoy and then you drop them into a situation and they'd have to resolve that situation in either 20 minutes or 40 minutes. And more we've moved towards serialized storytelling, and the worst version of the serialized storytelling is, I think, some of the Marvel Disney Plus stuff where it feels like a 4-hour movie that's a padded 4-hour movie broken up into 8 episodes that feel rushed and padded at the same time. And then you have this standalone story in the middle of here, all of this. And I liked that. Like, the idea that we're getting, like, what would happen if Matt Murdock was at a bank where there's a bank heist that took place. I like that. I enjoy that. And it makes me go, oh man, I wish we got more of this on some of the other stuff. In general, I think one of the big problems with the MCU that people don't even recognize that we're missing it is that there's not enough local hero action, where so many of the stories are at this massive level of alien invasions, the multiverse, that it's all the big, gigantic stuff that makes sense when you're making $250 million movies that you go this big, but you lose the local side to it. Even like with Spider-Man, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, you get a lot of that Friendly Neighborhood stuff in Homecoming, and then he goes to Europe, he goes to space, he goes to Washington, D.C., he plays around in the multiverse, but even the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man doesn't do all that much that's local, that feels like Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And, Moon Knight is a globe-trotting adventure, and Hawkeye, it's street level, but you don't get to see, like, what is Hawkeye like when he's just trying to, fight little stuff between the big adventures. What's he up to between the big adventures? It's like a specific story about him dealing with his past and haunting him and stuff like that. So the idea that in the middle of Daredevil, we do a little story that's just this little, like, him stopping a bank heist. I really like that. I really enjoy it. Is it the best possible version of this episode? No. Is there a little bit of corniness to it? Does it tonally feel way too different from the rest? Yeah. And this episode is a leftover from the previous version of the show, where there's a lot of, like, it was reshot but not completely reshot. In the, they were able to shift the tone around on a lot of them and change out actors like Vanessa. And so there's a lot of changes in the other episodes. This one, I think, is pretty well just intact. This is what the previous version of this show was like. This is our best glimpse into what it was. And I wouldn't want a full season of this, but as like a little offshoot, I liked it because it's a standalone story. And you think, what were comics like? What's the weekly adventure of Daredevil? What's the weekly Batman adventure? What's the weekly, or not, I guess comics are more monthly, but like you just have this little episode. And I like that. And in particular, like the pretty common even plot device in television that you're at the bank. And how will our heroes from this show stop the bank heist? Like, that's pretty common television back in the day. And so, I don't. There's almost a nostalgia to it to me, of the vibe of it. So I just dug it. It's just, I like this style of television. One thing a lot of people have been saying about last night's episode of Daredevil is that it's a filler episode. And it just bothers me so much that in our modern way of viewing television, where so much of it is serialized, that as soon as you have a standalone story that doesn't progress the bigger story, we go, oh, it's a filler episode. In my mind, we tune into television shows because we like the characters and want to see them on different types of adventures. That's what this episode did. Matt Murdock stopping a bank heist. That's not filler to me. That's just a different Matt Murdock adventure. There's, of course, reasons to criticize its tonal shift. Does it feel out of place? I understand. Those are totally valid arguments. But I don't like the idea of just slapping the label filler on it. I tune in to see the adventures of Matt Murdock. What did I get? The adventures of Matt Murdock in something different that kind of breaks the monotony of the grander story and what's going on with Wilson Fisk and him pondering through his turmoil of should I or shouldn't I be Daredevil. And in the middle of it, you have him using his very unique skill set in a bank heist, where how do bank heists work? There's guys over there talking and whispering to each other, and he can hear what they're saying. And he, like the simple thing of, they go up to the bank vault and Mr. Khan doesn't know how to open it because he was just kind of bluffing to like, what am I supposed to say? And Matt, with super hearing, can crack a safe. Like, oh, right. If he can do all this other stuff, if he can hear people down the road and start like, yeah, he can crack a safe. It's just simple little things like that like, I dug that about the episode. That's what I enjoy about it. Like I said, like, I totally get that it feels out of place. It really does. Like, it feels so different. And watching the two episodes back to back, it only highlights how this one is like way wildly different in every single thing about it. The storytelling, the pacing, everything feels different. Different doesn't mean bad, though. Like, I've had this thought. Like, should they have taken episode 5 of Daredevil Born Again and say, we like this as this little pocket thing? It just feels out of place in Daredevil Born Again. So what if we save this? We'll tweak it in reshoots, but we release it as a special presentation between seasons, because it stands on its own. And they already did all these reshoots. So you say, all right, we take an episode that works on its own, but it feels too different. Let's punch it up. Let's make it stand alone and make its time frame more ambiguous. Just tweak it a little bit and then release it in November or whatever. And you get a little extra Daredevil. And it's like, yeah, it's just a little Matt Murdock story of him stopping a bank heist. And so you're not viewing it as stopping momentum in a season. It's not like totally different because it's its own thing. I think a lot of people would have taken it a little bit better. It's just kind of this little surprise, something a little special, a nice presentation. I wonder if that would have worked out. On Kamala Khan's dad showing up, took me a second to piece it together. Like, it seemed like, oh, this guy seems familiar, but my brain wasn't opening up the Miss Marvel files. And so he starts talking, and then as soon as he starts talking about his daughter, you go, oh, is that what we're doing here? And it's kind of fun. This is another one where I've seen a bunch of comments on the internet, like debating, was this a cheap cameo or a cameo done right? Well, first off, it's neither, because it's not a cameo. He's the guest star on the episode. Once again, television, for decades upon decades upon decades, would have a weekly guest star that you'd watch the shows, and for their weekly adventure, they'd bring in some actor that has a strong resume to be the guest star. And if you watch network television from 20 years ago, you'll realize just how often familiar faces pop up, or people that are soon to break out big pop up. Like, very famously, in the first season of Smallville, Amy Adams, Oscar-winning actress, Lois Lane, is the guest star on that show. So she showed up and like had a whole episode about her eating deer and stuff like that and drinking kryptonite smoothies, but she was the guest star. And every week where there's a frequent week, there was a guest star, and it was very frequently either a familiar face or someone that broke out famous soon afterwards. Like Adam Brody was one of the guest stars in season 1. There's a lot of these guest stars. And then later seasons, they do Aquaman as the guest star. Alan Ritchson, Reacher himself, was Aquaman 20 years ago on Smallville. He was the guest star for the week. Saw something in him. Took a while for it to fully pay off, but now he's Reacher. All that to say, this is common stuff. The guest star of the week. That's like, this whole idea of cameos is a horrible misuse of the word. Like, we've forgotten we don't even know what the word cameo means anymore. And so it's like, if someone from a different thing shows up, well, that's a cameo. Is it a cheap cameo? He works at a bank, and it's about a bank heist. He's the guest star. This is totally normal stuff for television. Like, watch the Arrowverse stuff and watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel back 20, 25 years ago when there was 2 different shows in the Buffyverse, and every season on these different shared universe shows, or the Law and Order TV shows, or NCIS TV shows, the shows from different ones will show up to solve a case. Totally normal television stuff. That's why I liked it. That's like just classic television. So for me, I watched last night, the first of last night's episode. I was actually more invested in the first episode because it had a beginning and a middle and an end. Like, it's starting like, oh, they're getting wrapped up. Okay. Oh, Matt's going back in. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Like, how would a bank heist play with Matt with his powers? Oh, they're going downstairs. And like, you're invested because it's all right there. Whereas when it did the next episode, like for me, I watched the first 4 episodes when I got them from screeners. So I watched them several weeks ago. So there's a pretty big gap. I should have rewatched episode 4 this week just to make sure I was like right on the same page. But there's a little bit of a detachment there, and you were jumping into all these plot lines in different places and stuff. Versus like I was just like all in on the heist one. That doesn't mean it's better, but for me it hooked me a little bit better. It just like was easier for me to just like track right along and be all in on it when it was happening. So, I think I want more of these in our Disney Plus shows. Like, take our superhero shows and give them a little superhero adventure. We don't need just all the cleverness. Sometimes you don't need to reinvent television. You don't need to outthink things. We want to see superheroes on our superhero shows doing superhero stuff. And television, what it's good at is it makes you love characters and it puts them in interesting situations. That's what this episode did. Then we have episode 6. I imagine probably a lot of other people will probably have more of a deep dive into this one than I probably will. Once again, some of that's a little bit on me because I watched the first 4 episodes 3 weeks ago, 3.5 weeks or whenever, before they dropped, the first episodes dropped, I watched them. I watched episodes 1, 2, and 3 twice, but I didn't rewatch 4. And even the ones when I rewatched them, it was all before the original episodes dropped. So I'm not as fresh on what happened in last week's episode as all of you are, to pick up exactly where we're at on some of these things. But on our adventure, we've got a serial killer who is painting with the blood of the people that he has killed. Which, if you're going to kill someone, at least put it to good use. And he's putting art in this world. We need more artists in this world. Maybe he's the true hero of this story. But the city doesn't like the idea that he's killing people, so they're trying to stop him. Matt is still struggling with what is he going to do. He keeps fighting, getting too involved, and people keep coming to him, begging him to do something, contact whoever he knows, whether through interviews and journalists, little girls. People really want him to step back up. And he's holding off. And then parallel to this, we have Wilson Fisk. His darker side keeps calling. That he's trying to clean up, but he's got a dark side. So all of this kind of crescendos at the end of it. Little girl out wandering the streets gets taken by our serial killer, and Matt reaches his breaking point, and Daredevil must be born again. So he puts the mask back on, heads on out to save the day. And this is done parallel with Wilson returning to the rage of Kingpin. And he's had a guy locked up in his basement in a cage for banging his wife. And it is time for something to come of this. So it has both of them be reborn at the same time, essentially. It's kind of an interesting way to cut it. I don't, on a thematic level, and even when I was picking my picture, I went with Daredevil, but almost every other poster is the two of them. They're co-leads on the show. And so they do kind of this co-version of presenting them as returning to who they were previously. I feel like, not sure that I fully cutting between them, I think, hurt the momentum of each individual one, while thematically being satisfying in its own way. In particular, like with Daredevil, I'll elaborate more on this a little bit, but it's called Daredevil. And the way the show's structured, basically 2/3 of the season, he's not Daredevil. So he finally is Daredevil again. And you want that full payoff. You want the full satisfaction. Matt is Daredevil again. He's going for it. And they choose to edit it in a way that it keeps breaking the momentum of that. It continues momentum in a different way by having Kingpin, like, giving a guy an axe to be like, here's a tool to help you out. Come and try and kill me. Just kidding. I'm Kingpin. You're gonna die. Or I don't think it implied he killed him. It implied he really jacked him up pretty bad and locked him back up. But like, come and get it. You're not gonna beat me. And so you're seeing each of them like, I get it. Also think if there was a way to, I don't think I would have done it that way. I would have let each of them play as their own thing. So each of them has their own momentum to the sequence itself. So we can feel fully present in Matt's rebirth as Daredevil. We've been waiting for it, like really for 6 episodes. We finally get it. You want to like feel fully present. And likewise, Kingpin is finally back and violent again. And you want to be fully present in it. And as soon as you're cutting to something, a different thing, where even though they're parallel, I get it. I totally get it. I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have played it a little bit different. Other thoughts on here, not crazy about the CGI acrobatics. I've said this before, but I don't like the CGI acrobatics. That when he The original Netflix show had very cool acrobatic martial arts, but all of it was real stunt work. All of it was a person doing a thing. And as soon as you're in the middle of something that it's a stunt person doing a jump kick, and then they do a second thing that it's like, double flip or something like that, it is clearly CGI. It's not the same thing. I don't think it serves this show. And then with like all this stuff where he's spinning around with his Daredevil orang, it looks too CGI, and it's not for the better. And it's the problem of when you're trying to keep the same feel and vibe of a show that was very grounded. There's fantastical elements in the original Daredevil, especially with the hand and everything. But the feel of it, it's all anchored. And the action is anchored. It's not CGI. The CGI enhancements might be like, let's put flames on the guy. It's not the flips. The stunt work was real stunt work. So it just stands out. To the extent that, like, I wasn't as bothered when watching She-Hulk and they did very cartoonish Daredevil acrobatics, because that's a cartoonish show. It's a very silly show, bright colors. It's a cartoon. So him being more cartoonish with his swinging around and flips fit that show. But when you take those same cartoonish flips and swings and put them into a show that's not cartoonish, that's pretty anchored and grounded, it stands out. So I wish they hadn't done that. It's not of issues with the show. It's not, largely pretty minor, but it's a disappointment. Many of us have held up the fights in Daredevil as some of the best, not every single one of them, but pretty legendary on television, in particular the oneers, the hallway fight, the stairwell fight, and I forget what they call the one in the third season, but like really good choreography, very difficult to pull off stuff. It did need to be fixed. And I get you want to make your own stamp on it, but when you're keeping that grounded vibe to it, it looks out of place. It just does. Last one to talk about on here, he's finally in the costume. And I had a few conversations on the internet about this if it was pretty obvious, they dropped 2 episodes last night for 2 reasons. First off, episode 5 is just too different. And I imagine if they dropped that one, it's so different that people would be like, what on earth? Like, what? No story progress. You like teased. He's about to get going. Frank Castle. Nothing? Really? What? And then likewise, it would be 1 more week. No costume. And they went, what's people's tolerance for no Daredevil costume? So we'll do 2 episodes. It's this one-off. It's kind of fun, weird, and different vibe entirely. And then we'll deliver, move the story forward, get him in the suit. We think pretty obvious why they didn't want to go another week. Like, really? We're doing a bank heist to delay getting to the costume? What is going on here? The original version of the show, the reports were that Daredevil didn't show up in the costume for 4 episodes. When they did the reshoots, they added the new pilot. That for the episode 1 of this season is a brand new episode. And so you go, that means episode 1, he's in the costume at the beginning of it, and then there's their 4 episodes. So it turns into then there's 5 episodes where he's really not in the costume. And you just wonder if they should have reworked that a little bit. Or as I mentioned before, maybe for the sake of even this, let's get rid of our bank heist episode. Hold it off for something else, because it's 1 more episode where he's not in the costume. And it just feels like there's not a lot of Daredevil in Daredevil. And it wouldn't be the first time one of their shows was criticized for not having enough of the title character in the show. I get you want to do this born again. You want to like really build up to him putting the suit on means a lot. But even the way that the way they visualized him putting the suit back on, I thought was pretty odd. Because it's such an iconic moment. And so it's like he goes downstairs and it cuts to outside of him like swinging. And then the shot of him like reveal of it is after he's already been revealed swinging. So even like that of like, you'd think that more of like he walks into the room and you see the masks and then like he picks it up, brings it up to his face. And then you see something in the shadows spinning and then he like just really the way that they did the specific reveal also I thought was, you could have made that more impactful to it. But I imagine, I wonder what the current writers would have done if they were structuring it. If they would have taken 6 episodes, really. Because it's the end of the 6th episode that he's back in the suit. So that leads to a scenario where there's a 5.5 episode gap without the suit in Daredevil in a season that's only 9 episodes. So 2/3 of the season, no Daredevil in Daredevil. That's a weird choice. It's a strange way to do it that you can see why a lot of, like, you can like what they are delivering. I just praised episode 5. And I praised the episodes before that in my previous coverage. You can like the writing and the dialogue and the way they're handling a bunch of different things, but also be like, hey, wait a minute. Where's Daredevil in Daredevil? Shouldn't we have more Daredevil in here? I think that's entirely fair. Anyway, those are a bunch of rambly different. That's my thoughts, takeaway on these episodes. Let me know your thoughts down below. Keep talking movies and TV and Daredevil.